Welcome to Body Bags, presented by the Kokomo Lantern. My name is Jeremy Geiger, and I'm a co-owner of City of First Cremation and Funeral Services. Today's episode, I want to talk to you about a really neat experience that Kim and I got to be a part of here in Indiana. We made a trip to Conner Prairie last week. We seen on their website that they were doing a funeral reenactment in 1865. So really sparked Kim and I's interest, and they were going to kind of show us what that ritual and funeral service was like at that time period. And then I kind of just will tell you what I seen as some similarities and differences. And maybe it'll spark your interest next year to be a part of that out at Conner Prairie, because what a great family experience for the day. So we arrived out at Conner Prairie in the afternoon. They anticipated the burial at 2 p.m. And there was some ceremonies leading up to this burial at 2. So we got there and we did the normal things at Conner Prairie and visited the Indian area, and then we went into Prairie Town. We got to go through some of those, like the general store, and we got to talking with one of the people in the general store, and they mentioned that they'd had a death in Prairie Town the night before. They said there was a traveler that was coming through, had only been there for a few days, and ended up passing from something called the slows. That was new to me. Come to find out, the slows, it was related to milk disease, which still kind of puzzled me. But I guess there is a weed or something that grows out in the fields that their cattle may have consumed, and that tainted their milk. And when I was thinking of slows, that it would be this maybe long drawn out death where they weren't eating or something, it was kind of the opposite of that. I kind of would consider it the fasts. They talked about vomiting, diarrhea, very severe, to the point where it just succumbed and you were exhausted and dehydrated and you passed away. I guess the slows part of it was a slow and agonizing death. The person they buried there that day was Mr. Fishburne. I don't know. I'm going to give you guys some pictures and videos so that way you can maybe see some of these things. But we arrived at the cemetery when we were talking to the gentleman who was going to be a pallbearer at the general store. He directed us towards the cemetery, and we went over there. They had a gentleman that was playing an acoustic guitar, singing some hymns and old folk songs. And while they were doing that, or he was doing that, there was the grave digger. He said that he started around the break of dawn, and it took him approximately 4.5 to 5 hours to dig the grave. When we were there, it was close. As we know, it's not going to be 6 feet because it's just a reenactment, but he was down probably 4.5 feet, 5 feet. It was pretty deep. Talked to that gentleman. He did not really know. The traveler said that he ran into him when he first came to town, and that he was a salesperson. And he mentioned that the carpenter in town was building the casket, and that the local preacher would conduct the services. There was no family present since he was a traveler, no next of kin. So it was kind of interesting to see their community kind of bond together. Even though this person didn't have family, they still treated him like a dignified community member. There were people that wore these lapel corsages. They were to signify that there was a death in their community. So we got to recreate one that was similar to what they would have worn back then. So we each wore one of these. It was really neat to see some of the actual actors because theirs were a lot different than these, a little nicer. But it was interesting to see how each one of them had a role, whether it was coordinating with the pallbearers. Or there was one person that supplied the ox to pull the wagon to the cemetery. There is no funeral director or undertaker at this point in Indiana. It was, like I mentioned, it was the carpenter that built the casket, and he held the body and placed the body in that casket. And then the minister arrived at the carpenter's shop with the pallbearers, and they loaded that casket onto the actual hay wagon to be pulled towards the graveyard. We walked in procession, which was pretty neat. Occasionally here in Kokomo, we do get to encounter a walking procession. There is a particular church here in town where the cemetery is right next door. So we either wheel out the back door, or I have come out through the front on a smaller group of individuals to walk around the church to do this burial. So the similarities that I seen was the care for the deceased. Everybody kind of takes a loss differently, but it's not easy to hear that somebody is not with us anymore, because we know it impacts other people's lives. So it was really, really interesting to see maybe the camaraderie between the community members to see this task through. I still feel to a degree we see some of that camaraderie, but maybe not near as banded as they were there. They had the gentleman who was playing music out at the graveyard meet back at the carpenter's shop, and he continued on to the gravesite with us playing a song. Before we left, he kind of helped us guests understand the music that we were singing and gave us sheet music that we could be a part of that. Once we got to the graveyard, which wasn't a very far walk, the pallbearers came back up to that trailer and they carried the deceased over. Now, in today's modern times, we're used to seeing the pallbearers set that casket on a lowering device. These times that we're talking about in 1865, there was no mechanical lowering device. There was no embalming that was taking place at that point. They were literally unembalmed, placed in that pine box. It wasn't what we see as a casket today. It was what I call a toenailed shape, where it's kind of a diamond cut to it. But yeah, so the cemetery side of it was a little bit different because that lowering device wasn't there. These pallbearers, they carried that casket, and then they used rope that they had fastened around that casket, and they each held a section of that rope and lowered that casket down into the grave. Then the minister come forward and he delivered a eulogy. His eulogy was very religious based, which would have been very time specific. We wouldn't have gotten into memorializing that person's life with a eulogy. It's more of knowing that it's okay and that there are bigger things for us outside of our earthly body. So it was really neat to see that that minister deliver this eulogy. We still used the Lord's Prayer, something we typically see. And then as that service concluded, we were able to go up and kind of peek into the grave and see that casket there. They laid a flower on top of it, which I thought was pretty cool. And then when they concluded with that and everybody kind of passed by, they went over to their stage area and continued with more songs that you would hear for that funeral service. And believe it or not, they were pretty basic songs. The musical scale fa sol la ti da. They were singing by shapes, and we were learning what these shapes were, whether it was a fa or la or do or sa, it was pretty cool, a lot of fun. I really encourage you to explore Conner Prairie, whether it's on just the historical side of Indiana, or if you've got an interest like we did, to go and see the burial site of what a funeral was like in 1865. They do this every year. There are several graves that they've done. They'll put a headstone up for Mr. Fishbone, which I know I'm saying that wrong. Fishburne, I don't know. I'll have to go back and I'll put it in a comment what the actual name was. But it was really, really neat to see. Do we see corsages or badges like this in our area? No, but it made me think of some of our southern states. I have a friend who's a funeral director in Georgia, and he educated me on a mourning badge, and I thought, what in the world's a mourning badge? This is what I was envisioning. And that mourning badge was actually a wreath that was placed on the door of the deceased's house or family's house when they came and picked up the body to signify there was a loss. Absolutely beautiful. I love this idea for your guests, but I also love the idea of that wreath being on the door, just to let your community know or your neighbors know that, hey, I'm kind of going through some tough things. I've lost a family member or a friend, and I'm just going through some emotions, and be patient with me. So that was one of the neat things that we did last week with funeral service. I'm going to kind of conclude with you on a story. This one is a rather new story for me. I've kind of mentioned pre-planning, pre-arranging with you all before, and its importance. I'm working with a lady right now who is battling cancer. She thought she had it beat, and it reared its ugly head twice as mean to her, and she is losing her battle very rapidly. I helped this lady with her daughter who passed away, and when she called me the other week, she said, I've never forgot the young man that walked me down the aisle while I said goodbye to my daughter. I want you to do that with my son. So it's really important that not only are you pre-planning, but you're expressing your wishes. Some of this lady's wishes were a little unique. She's going to be scattered in a couple of different locations across the United States, which isn't uncommon in my opinion. I see a lot of scattering. But what I thought was pretty funny was I asked her, I said, so what should we listen to? And she said, well, you've already got my funeral music. What do you mean? And I meant, what are we going to listen to on that final ride? That final ride isn't just for her. It's for me. It's for her family. It's one last way to show that I really do care and that I will follow out your wishes. It's not just about making sure that I ordered pink roses for the casket spray or the urn arrangement. It's not about making sure that Billy makes it to the funeral on time. It's the smaller things. It's making sure that your wishes are truly followed through, and making sure that journey for you to the other side is done a little easier for you, a little more dignified. I've been very thankful to be able to create these connections with these families. I think it makes it easier for those in that transition of leaving this world, knowing that they got their last wishes expressed. think too many times that we see that we're sitting with that family and they say, I have no idea what they would want. I don't even know what their favorite color was. I may remember what song I always heard when I came over to the house to visit. You never know. But to express that, not to just the pre-need counselor that's going to try to sell you that insurance policy, but to that funeral director that's really going to be there and receive that phone call. I know her journey's not been easy, but she's had a beautiful life. She got a really wonderful family. I know it's not easy for any of them. They're all playing different roles for her last days here, whether it's a caregiver, whether it's a person to run to the bank for them, to close out that account, whether it's mailing out that last package to the grandkid. Each of our roles are very important. So be there, support your family and your loved ones. They're not easy tasks, but it's the best task you can give a person on your last days, because they'll always remember that you asked them, you were counting on them. It's really important. Express your wishes to your family members. Come to your local funeral home. Get it down on paper. Make that connection with the funeral home, so that way we can know how to help guide your family through those final arrangements. You know, everybody's idea is a little bit different on how that funeral memorialization should be, but you've got to come and express those wishes. It's not always just about trying to tell that one person, because there are other people that are involved and they may get overheard or overspoken and not get to express it to the full extent. So if you're listening and watching and you see and know that some of these things may hit home and it may be difficult to come to the funeral home, call that local funeral home and ask them to come to the house. That's what I did for this lady. She's no longer able to leave. The furthest journey she can make is possibly to the bathroom on a good day. Your funeral homes will really appreciate being invited in. It makes a very big impact on us to be able to do that. It's super important to us. I think it helps in our longevity in our career as well, because we're seeing the beginning. A lot of times we're just seeing the inside of it, but to be included in those very special moments is very opening to us on what you're going through. You know, we always see the aftermath of things and we hear of what led up to this death. To be invited in is super special. So this does conclude my services today for Body Bags. Once again, I'm Jeremy Geiger from City of First Cremation. Please like, subscribe, and share these episodes through YouTube and the Kokomo Lantern channel. If you have questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. I do check them often along with Pat, and he'll forward them along to me if I miss one. But this does conclude my services today. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.